Pastor Jeremy Combs, and thank you for joining us as we're looking at the doctrine of the divine in the book of Deuteronomy. We're in the 3rd chapter, and we're looking at, again, some victories, some really, I guess, for those of you that didn't like it in school, we're looking at history here. And you say, why spend all this time on history? Because if you don't remember history, one person has famously said, you're doomed to repeat it. History reminds us of victories that are going to be a blessing and encouragement to us, especially when it comes to the Lord. Think of the encouragement we have all received from stories like Noah and the ark, and David and Goliath, and Daniel and the lion's den. And I fear for some of us that are reading these books of Deuteronomy, like today, we're looking at Og, the king, and we're looking at some names, Gilead, others, and Mount Hermon, and it doesn't mean as much to us because we're not as familiar with the geography of the land. Now, if you would insert things like New York, or you would put in Washington, D.C., or Indianapolis, or things like that, boy, our ears would perk up and say, oh, wow, that's where that took place. If we were to say names like George Washington, if we were to say even names not necessarily from our nation, like Winston Churchill or nefarious Adolf Hitler, we would all understand and figure that this has affected our nation. And so Moses, remember, he's in the final month of his life. He's spent he'll really spend the first, what would this be, 3.5 chapters going over history. And it's all going to a payoff, which you're going to begin to see here at the end of chapter 3, where we're going to find out about Moses, we're going to find out about Joshua, and then in chapter 4, we really ramp things up because now it's going to culminate in the covenant that they had made back on Mount Sinai with God, and how important that is. And so let's not be weary in well-doing. Things are going to pick up here, but it says in chapter 3 and verse 1, then we turned and we went up the way to Bashan, and Og, the king of Bashan, came out against us, and all the people to battle at Edrei. Now, Edrei and the king of Og demonstrate for us some of the great fears that they had. 38.5 years earlier, they were afraid of the people, the battles, the walled cities. We've seen glimpses of that. And then the big explanation was that there were giants in the land. And we'll look at Og here in just a little bit. And the Lord said unto me, fear him not. There's 365 fear nots in the Bible because we as people tend to be a little bit fearful in life. And God says, don't fear. I don't know what is going on in your life today. I don't know what the King Og is in your life, whether it be finances can really make us fearful. Maybe it's a health situation. Maybe it's a spiritual battle. Can I tell you, God would say the same to us. Fear not. Why? For I will deliver him and all his people and his land into thy hand, and thou shalt do unto him as thou hast done unto Sihon, the king of the Amorites, which dwelt at Heshbon. So God even points back and says, remember what I did to Sihon. I'm going to do the same to Og. We forget spiritual victories. It's amazing. We can remember so many things. Typically, we remember the things we should forget, and we forget the things we ought to remember. We need to put failures way behind us. We need to put past defeats behind us. But those are the things we tend to stew on, dwell on. And when it comes to these victories, boy, it ought to, especially spiritual victories, even the more, give us a sense of confidence. Well, we find that God understood this, and so he said, I'm going to deliver Og over to you just like I did the other king of Sihon. And we took all his cities at that time, and there was not a city, verse 3. And so the Lord our God delivered into our hands Og. It's just kind of like okay, here's what, this is real big up, and then, yes, God did it. Okay, very simple. And the king unto Og, also the king of Bashan and all his people, and we smote him until none was left to him remaining. So they wiped out the reign of Og, and we took all his cities at that time. There was not a city which we took not from him, 80 cities, all the region of Argob, the kingdom of Og in Bashan. All these cities were fenced with high walls. They're confronting their fear. Gates and bars, and besides unwalled towns, a great many. And so there's just all kinds of towns, some that didn't have walls, many that did have walls and barred gates. And the very things that they feared, God is helping them and giving them victory in those areas. But all the cattle and the spoils of the city that we took for a prey to ourselves. And we took at that time out of the hand of the two kings of the Amorites the land that was on this side Jordan, from the river of Arnon unto Mount Hermon. Now, this is important because this is not only history of victory, but it's history of why are some of the nations of Israel on the other side of Jordan. Reuben, Gad, the half tribe of Manasseh, they're going to remain on this side. And this is how they inherited, or how they got the land they wanted. It was conquest. Which Hermon, the Sidonians called Sirion, and the Ammonites call it Shinar, and all the cities of the plain, and all Gilead and Bashan and Salcach and Adrai, cities of the kingdom of Og and Bashan. That's a fun verse. For only Og, king of Bashan, remained of the remnant of giants. Okay, that's the other thing they feared. They feared the walled cities. They feared the giants. Behold, his bedstead was a bedstead of iron. Now, I mused on this today as I was thinking about this bed. It's almost like a luxury type of a thing. And in those days, iron, metal, those kinds of things, precious metals, would have been a commodity, especially for battle. And I think really what good old, I don't want to say good old Mr. Og, the great king, said, I could use iron for my weapons of war, but we've got so many weapons of war. And his confidence, overconfidence in himself, to me, and maybe I'm reading into this more than what I should, he actually just said, instead of making more weapons, I'm going to make me this beautiful, glorious bed of iron that I can sleep in every night. And maybe it reminded him of how mighty and how powerful they are. Boy, it reminds us of what David said. Here's Og thinking this iron bed is going to protect him, and it all came crumbling down. David said this, I will both lay me down and sleep. How? For thou, Lord, only makest me dwell in safety. Is it not in Raboth of the children of Ammon? 9 cubits was the length thereof, 4 cubits the breadth of it, and after the cubit of a man. So this bed is, now cubit, we don't exactly know what a cubit is. We think it's about 1.5 feet. You say, why is that? Well, cubic length would be from the tip of your finger down to your elbow. So obviously, if even you and I stood together today and we put our arms next to each other, our arms would be different sizes. And so with a rough estimate here, this bed would have been about 11 feet long, approximately. And, the width would have been about like a king size type of a bed. But this guy was a tall man. Figure if the bed's 11 feet, he's probably about, 9 to 10 feet tall. And God reminds us of these elements so that we can remember, hey, those giants you feared, we could take care of that. And this land which was possessed at that time, this is verse 12, from Aroer, which is by the river Arnon and half Mount Gilead, and the cities thereof gave I unto the Reubenites and to the Gadites. So there's the Reuben, Gad, and the half tribe of Manasseh. And the rest of Gilead and all Bashan, being the kingdom of Og, gave I unto the half tribe of Manasseh, and all the region of Argob, which was with all Bashan, which was called the land of giants. And Jair, the son of Manasseh, took all the country of Argob under the coast of Geshurai and Maccathai, and called them after his own name, Baasha Havoth Jair, unto this day. Well, the name already was long, and he kind of tacked his name onto the end just to maybe make it even more eloquent. And I gave Gilead unto Maker, and unto the Reubenites and unto the Gadites I gave from Gilead, even unto the river Arnon, half the valley, and the border even of the river Jabbok, which is the border of the children of Ammon. The plain also in Jordan, and the coast thereof, from Chinnereth, even unto the sea of the plain, even the salt sea, under Ashdoth Pisgah eastward. And I commanded you at the time, saying, the Lord your God hath given you the land to possess it. So now we leave this eloquent history lesson to now kind of get to where the rubber meets the road. We get the application. Moses said, the Lord your God's given you the land to possess it. Ye shall pass over armed before your brethren and the children of Israel and all that are meet for war. But your wives, your little ones, your cattle, for I know that ye have much cattle, shall abide in your cities, which I have given you, until the Lord have given rest unto your brethren as well as unto you, and unto they also possess the land which the Lord your God hath given them beyond Jordan. And then shall you return every man unto his possession, which I have given you. So now what we're getting into is Moses, remember, Reuben, Gad, and the half-tribe of Manasseh come, and they say they want to not go over into the promised land. They're content to stay where they are. They like what they see. And Moses, it's not the best plan. And boy, you get into the perfect and the permissive wills of God here again. We looked at it with the spies. Now we see God wanted them to go in and have their land. But in essence, they kind of put the brakes on and say, well, you know, we're happy. We'll take this. Never be content for good or better when you can have best. And is it the evil end of the world? I don't think so, because God would not have permitted it. But I think God had so much better, and you're going to see lots of problems take place because these 2.5 tribes take the convenient, the comfortable way out. Now, as they're doing this, Moses does command them. He says, you know, you need to go in and fight with your brethren. And so you can make your civilization, you can make your tents, your dwellings here, but you're going to go across and you're going to fight and you're going to help them. And then when everything is said and done, you can come back and sure, we'll give you this land to possess. Verse 21, and I commanded Joshua at that time, saying, thine eyes have seen all that the Lord your God hath done unto these 2 kings. So why history? Well, Joshua is going to need it. Joshua's filling in some pretty big shoes. Moses is revered even to this day. I think about the movie The 10 Commandments, Cecil B. DeMille. And who gets most of the screen time? Who gets most of the attention? Joshua is, but it's Moses. You say, well, Pastor, that's who led the nation of Israel out of Egypt. That's who God gave the 10 Commandments to. I know, and just for emphasis, I know. But yet, we've got to know that Moses is not going to live forever. We're going to see that by the end of this chapter. And Joshua is going to have to assume the reins of leadership. And God understands that Joshua is going to need encouragement, and that he's going to need some confidence here. It can only come from God. And so we find here that they're going to tell him, remember what the Lord your God did to these 2 kings, and so shall the Lord do unto all the kingdoms whither thou possess. Ye shall not fear them, for the Lord your God, he shall fight for you. And that leads us into what God, the major emphasis of Joshua from God is, have not I commanded thee, be strong and of a good courage. Be not afraid, neither be thou dismayed. For why? For the Lord, is it because problems are not there? No, it's for the Lord your God is with you, whithersoever thou goest. I think I'm going to stop there at verse 22, because we get into a request and we find that God does not answer that request for Moses. And we'll get into that the next time we get together. But we look at a rather lengthier passage with a lot of names, maybe that don't mean a whole lot to us, but they meant a whole lot to Israel. And maybe years went by and generations went by, and why is Reuben, Gad, and half-tribe of Manasseh not technically in what we would call our land of promise? And how did Joshua do it? Was Joshua just an amazing leader? Was Joshua just a 1 in a million kind of a guy? Well, not taking anything away from Joshua, but then again, also taking everything away from Joshua. It was God, it was God, it was God. Who will give you victory? Who will help you overcome your fears? It is God. Let us never forget that. Hey, God bless you. Thank you for joining us. We'll see you next time.